The sun had barely risen over the horizon, casting a golden hue across the arid plains of Blackwater Valley. The air was still, save for the faint rustle of dry grass swaying in the morning breeze. In the distance, a lone coyote let out a mournful howl, its echo fading into vast emptiness that surrounded the small town of Red Hollow. It was a place where dust storms were as common as breaths, and where survival depended on grit and determination. But today, something felt different. Something unsettling hung in the air like an unspoken warning. At the edge of town, near the old windmill that creaked with every gust of wind, stood an elderly woman named Eleanor Finch. Her silhouette against the rising sun was both frail and formidable, her back slightly hunched from years of toil, but her eyes sharp and calculating. She carried a sack of scraps over her shoulder, walking steadily toward the forest that bordered the valley. People whispered about Eleanor. Some called her eccentric. Others outright claimed she was cursed. Either way, no one dared approach her when she ventured beyond the safety of Red Hollow's wooden fences. As she reached the tree-line, Eleanor paused for a moment, glancing back at the sleeping town. The streets were quiet, the saloon doors closed tight, and only a few chickens pecked lazily at the dirt. Satisfied that no one followed her, she stepped into the shadows of the pines. The forest here was dense, the trees towering above her like silent sentinels guarding secrets long buried. As she walked deeper, the sunlight filtered to the canopy in thin beams, creating patterns of light and shadow on the forest floor. Eleanor stopped under a large oak tree, its gnarled roots twisting upward like skeletal fingers. She knelt down, placing the sack beside her. From it, she pulled pieces of bread, half-eaten apples, and other remnants of food. With deliberate care, she scattered them around the base of the tree. Then she sat back on her heels, waiting patiently. It wasn't long before the first wolf appeared. Its fur was matted and dirty, evidence of many hard winters and battles fought. Its amber eyes locked on Eleanor, cautious yet curious. Slowly, it approached the offerings, sniffing the air before daring to take a bite. Encouraged by this initial trust, more wolves emerged from the underbrush. 5, then 10, until nearly 20 pairs of glowing eyes watched her from the darkness. They ate silently, their movements graceful despite their hunger. Eleanor remained motionless, her gaze steady as if communicating some unspoken bond with these creatures of the wild. But little did they know, this act of kindness would have consequences neither could foresee. Back in Red Hollow, life continued much as it always had. Men saddled horses at the stables, women hung laundry out to dry, and children played tag in the dusty streets. Yet beneath the surface, unease simmered. Over the past week, strange occurrences plagued the town. Livestock went missing overnight without so much as a trace left behind. Crops in the fields showed signs of trampling, though no hoofprints or tracks could be found. And most disturbing of all, several townsfolk swore they heard low growls echoing through the night, even though wolves rarely ventured this close to civilization. Inside the general store, Sheriff Jonas Carter leaned against the counter, deep in conversation with Doc Thompson. Both men wore expressions of concern, their voices low enough to avoid alarming the customers milling about. "This can't go on, Doc," Jonas said, rubbing his chin thoughtfully. "If we don't figure out what's causing this, we'll lose everything." Doc adjusted his glasses, nodding solemnly. "I agree, but there's nothing natural about it. These disappearances, they're too clean. Like whatever's doing this knows exactly what it wants." Jonas sighed heavily, running a hand through his graying hair. "And then there's Eleanor. You've seen her, haven't you? Taking food out to those woods every morning." "I have," Doc replied, his tone tinged with disapproval. "People talk. Some say she's feeding animals. Others claim she's summoning spirits. Whatever the truth is, I think we need to find out sooner rather than later." Just then, a young boy burst into the store, breathless and wide-eyed. Sheriff, you gotta come quick. There's smoke coming from the south pasture." Without another word, Jonas grabbed his hat and bolted outside, Doc hot on his heels. Sure enough, thick black smoke billowed into the sky, visible even from this distance. Mounting their horses, they galloped toward the source, hearts pounding with dread. When they arrived, they found chaos. Several cattle lay dead, their bodies torn apart by unseen forces. Surrounding them were claw marks etched into the earth, far larger than any predator native to the region. Nearby, flames licked at the parched grass, threatening to spread further. Jonas quickly organized efforts to extinguish the fire while Doc examined the remains, his brow furrowing with each new discovery. "These wounds," he murmured, pointing to jagged cuts along the carcasses. "They're precise. Too precise for a wild animal. What are you saying?" Jonas asked, his voice tense. "That whoever or whatever is responsible isn't acting alone. This feels planned, organized." Meanwhile, Eleanor returned to her modest cabin nestled at the outskirts of Red Hollow, built decades ago by her late husband. It was a simple structure made of weathered logs and patched-up shingles. Inside, the walls were lined with shelves containing jars of preserves, dried herbs, and books filled with notes written in her neat handwriting. A small fireplace crackled softly, providing warmth against the chill of the early morning. She settled into a rocking chair, closing her eyes as memories flooded back. Once upon a time, she hadn't been feared or shunned. She'd been a wife, a mother, a part of community. But tragedy struck when her son disappeared during a hunting trip, leaving behind only his rifle and a single boot. The grief consumed her, driving her to seek solace in places others wouldn't dare tread: the forests, the mountains, the forgotten corners of the world. That's where she met them, the wolves. Over time, she formed a connection with them, learning their habits, understanding their needs. To her, they weren't just predators. They were survivors, struggling against the encroachment of humanity. So she fed them, nurtured them, and protected them. In return, they guarded her, staying nearby whenever danger threatened. But now, things were changing. The wolves' behavior had shifted recently, becoming bolder, more aggressive. And Eleanor couldn't shake the feeling that their loyalty might soon be tested in ways she never imagined. By dusk, the entire town gathered in the square, uneasy murmurs rippling through the crowd. Lanterns cast flickering light over anxious faces, as Jonas climbed onto stage outside the saloon to address everyone. "Folks," he began, his voice firm but laced with urgency, "we're facing a problem unlike anything we've seen before. Animals are disappearing. Property is being destroyed. And tonight, we may face our greatest challenge yet. Until we understand what's happening, I urge everyone to stay inside after dark. Lock your doors, check your windows, and keep your weapons close." Whispers erupted throughout the assembly, fear evident in every voice. One man raised his hand hesitantly. "Sheriff, do you think it's the wolves? We've heard rumors." Jonas hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "It's possible, but until we gather more evidence, I won't jump to conclusions. What I will say is this: if anyone sees anything unusual, report it immediately. We need to stick together if we hope to survive." As the meeting adjourned, people dispersed reluctantly, casting nervous glances toward the surrounding wilderness. Even the bravest among them felt the weight of impending doom settling over their shoulders. Night fell swiftly, blanketing Red Hollow in darkness. Stars twinkled brightly overhead, their brilliance undiminished by city lights. Within the confines of her cabin, Eleanor listened intently, her ears attuned to the sounds of the night. Outside, the wind picked up, carried with it faint howls that sent chills down her spine. Suddenly, there was a knock at her door. Startled, she rose slowly, gripping a lantern in one hand and a poker in the other. Who would visit her at such an hour? Through the cracks in the boards, she saw shadows moving beyond the porch. Swallowing her fear, she opened the door cautiously. To her astonishment, it was Jonas, his face pale and strained. Behind him stood two deputies, their hands resting nervously on their holsters. "Eleanor," Jonas greeted, his tone urgent. "We need to talk. Now." Reluctantly, she stepped aside, allowing them entrance. Once inside, Jonas wasted no time explaining the situation. "There's been sightings. Dozens of wolves circling the perimeter of the town. They haven't attacked yet, but it's only a matter of time. We believe you're involved somehow." Eleanor stiffened, anger flaring within her. Involve? How dare you accuse me of bringing harm to my own home? Those wolves are starving, desperate. If not for me, they'd already be raiding your livestock or worse. But why feed them at all? One deputy interjected. Why risk drawing them closer to us? Because they deserve better. Eleanor snapped, her voice trembling with emotion. You humans destroy everything in your path. Their land, their prey, their lives. All I'm doing is trying to maintain balance. Jonas rubbed his temples, frustration evident. Balance or not, Eleanor, right now, those wolves represent a threat to everyone in this town. If you won't help us stop them, then perhaps it's time you left. Her jaw clenched, tears brimming in her eyes. And leave them to die? No, I won't abandon them. Outside, the tension mounted. Wolves howled in unison, their voices resonating through the night like a chilling symphony. Torches lit the rooftops as residents prepared for battle, unsure whether they faced beasts or something far more sinister. Then, unexpectedly, silence fell. For a moment, nothing moved. No wind stirred the leaves, no cricket chirped in the darkness. It was as though the world itself held its breath, until a figure emerged from the shadows, a massive wolf, its coat jet black and gleaming under the moonlight. Its eyes glowed red, unnatural and menacing. Flanking it were dozens of others, their forms lean and muscular, teeth bared in anticipation. Red Hollow trembled, knowing full well that whatever happened next would change their lives forever. But what none of them realized, not Eleanor, not Jonas, not even the wolves, was that the true mastermind behind this unfolding drama lurked hidden among the trees, watching, waiting, plotting a revenge centuries in the making. The massive black wolf stepped forward, its presence commanding and unnerving. Its red eyes seemed to pierce through the night, locking onto each person in the town square with an intensity that made even the bravest hearts falter. Behind it, the pack moved as one, their movements fluid and synchronized, like waves crashing against the shore. The silence was deafening, broken only by the occasional creak of a wooden board or the soft rustle of leaves in the wind. Inside her cabin, Eleanor stood frozen, her hand pressed against the window pane as she watched the scene unfold. She felt a strange mix of emotions, fear for her neighbors, anger at their accusations, and guilt for what she had unknowingly unleashed. But deep down there was also pride. These wolves were survivors, fighters who refused to be driven into extinction. And yet, she couldn't ignore the growing suspicion that something wasn't right. This level of organization, this coordinated effort, it didn't feel natural. Back in the square, Jonas tightened his grip on his revolver, sweat trickling down his brow despite the coolness of the night. He glanced around, assessing the situation. Every able-bodied man in Red Hollow was armed, lanterns casting flickering light across tense faces. Women and children huddled together behind closed doors, peering out through cracks and keyholes, their prayers whispered into the darkness. "Stay calm," Jonas called out, his voice steady but laced with underlying tension. "We don't want trouble unless they force it upon us." The black wolf tilted its head slightly, as if considering his words. Then, without warning, it let out a low growl, a sound that resonated deep within the chests of everyone present. The pack responded instantly, stepping forward in unison until they formed a perfect circle around the town square. Their glowing eyes reflected the lantern light, creating an eerie halo effect that sent shivers down spines. Eleanor's breath hitched. She knew this behavior all too well. Wolves rarely acted so deliberately unless provoked or guided. Her mind raced back to recent encounters with the pack, searching for any clue that might explain their sudden aggression. Had she missed something? Was there someone or something else influencing them? In the chaos of the moment, a young boy named Tommy slipped away from the crowd, curiosity getting the better of him. Barely 12 years old, he had always been fascinated by stories of the Wild West, the cowboys, the outlaws, the untamed wilderness. Tonight, however, those tales felt far less glamorous. Still, he couldn't resist sneaking closer to get a better look at the wolves. Perhaps he could discover why they had surrounded the town. Tommy crept along the side of a building, staying low and avoiding direct eye contact with the predators. He reached the edge of the square just as the black wolf took another step forward, its claws clicking softly against the dirt. The boy froze, holding his breath as the creature turned its head in his direction. For a heartbeat, their gazes met, and then, unbelievably, the wolf lowered itself into a submissive posture, ears flattened against its skull. Confusion washed over Tommy. Why wasn't it attacking? What did it want? Before he could ponder further, a faint whisper carried on the wind, almost too quiet to hear. It came not from the wolf, but from deeper within the forest. A voice, smooth and melodic, spoke words neither human nor animal. They weren't in English, Spanish, or any language Tommy recognized, but somehow he understood their meaning. You will pay for what you've done. Chills ran down his spine as he scrambled back toward the safety of the crowd. When he arrived, breathless and trembling, he blurted out everything he'd seen and heard. At first, no one believed him. How could a wolf speak? Or rather, how could it make someone think it was speaking? But Jonas listened intently, piecing together fragments of information. The voice Tommy described sounded eerily familiar, like something out of old legends told around campfires during long winter nights. Legends about spirits bound to the land, angered by humanity's greed and disrespect. Meanwhile, Eleanor decided it was time to intervene. Grabbing her lantern, she stepped outside her cabin and walked steadily toward the square. The wolves noticed her immediately, parting to allow her passage. Even the black wolf shifted its stance, bowing its head slightly in acknowledgement. "Enough," she said firmly, her voice carrying across the open space. "Whatever game you're playing, it ends now." The black wolf raised its head, amber eyes meeting hers. For a moment, they simply stared at each other, a silent exchange passing between them. Then, unexpectedly, the wolf stepped aside, revealing a figure hidden among the shadows. It was a woman, though not entirely human. Her skin shimmered like moonlight on water, her hair flowing like silver threads caught in the breeze. Around her neck hung a necklace of carved bones, each piece etched with intricate symbols. Her eyes glowed with the same unnatural red hue as the wolves, and her presence radiated power so immense it made Eleanor stagger backward. "You!" Eleanor gasped, recognition dawning. "I thought you were gone." "I am many things," the woman replied, her voice echoing like distant thunder. "But I am not gone, not while my kin suffer at the hands of your kind." Realization struck Eleanor like a blow to the chest. This was no ordinary spirit. This was the embodiment of the forest itself, a guardian sworn to protect all living creatures within its domain. Centuries ago, settlers had driven her people to near extinction, cutting down trees, polluting rivers, and hunting animals without mercy. In retaliation, she had forged alliances with the wolves, teaching them strategies to survive and sometimes to fight back. But why now? Eleanor asked, desperation creeping into her tone. Why turn against Red Hollow? The woman's lips curled into a cold smile. "Because you gave me hope. You fed my wolves when others would have killed them. You showed compassion when none existed. And for that, I spared you. But your kindness was misplaced. Your townsfolk fear what they cannot control. They will destroy everything unless they learn respect." Eleanor shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "Please give them a chance. Let me help mediate." The woman considered her request, tilting her head thoughtfully. Finally, she spoke. "Very well. But know this. If they fail to prove themselves worthy, the consequences will be severe. Until then, the wolves shall remain nearby, watching, waiting." With that, she vanished into thin air, leaving behind nothing but the lingering scent of pine needles and earth. The wolves followed suit, disappearing into forest as quickly as they had appeared. The next morning, Red Hollow awoke to an uneasy peace. The sun rose higher, chasing away the remnants of the previous night's terror. People emerged cautiously from their homes, exchanging nervous glances and hesitant smiles. Miraculously, no one had been harmed, but the message was clear. Jonas summoned a town meeting, gathering everyone in the square once more. This time, however, the atmosphere was different. Gone was hostility, replaced by a collective desire to understand and heal. Eleanor stood beside him, her presence a reminder of the delicate balance between humanity and nature. "We've been given a second chance," Jonas declared, his voice firm yet compassionate. "From this day forward, we must work together, not just with each other, but with the land and its inhabitants. If we fail, we risk losing everything." Applause erupted, though it was tempered by solemnity. Deep down, everyone knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Sacrifices would need to be made, sacrifices that challenged their very way of life. Yet, for the first time in years, there was hope. As the meeting adjourned, Eleanor returned to her cabin, carrying with her a renewed sense of purpose. She continued feeding the wolves, teaching them to trust humans again. Over time, relationships formed. Not friendships, perhaps, but mutual respect built on shared understanding. And as for the mysterious woman of the forest, she remained ever watchful. Her presence felt in every rustling leaf and every howling wind. Little did the townsfolk know, her patience was finite, and their redemption far from guaranteed. The days that followed were tense, filled with a mixture of fear and determination. The townsfolk of Red Hollow began to adapt, though it was not an easy transition. Under Jonas's leadership, they devised new ways to coexist with the land and its creatures. Hunting restrictions were put in place, and efforts were made to restore parts of the forest that had been ravaged by years of neglect. Fields were replanted with native crops, and waterways were cleaned, all under the watchful eyes of the wolves who lingered at the edge of town. Eleanor became the bridge between the humans and the wolves, her knowledge of their habits and behaviors proving invaluable. She spent her days teaching the townsfolk how to recognize signs of distress among the animals and how to avoid provoking them. Slowly but surely, the hostility that once defined their relationship began to fade, replaced by a cautious harmony. Yet, beneath this fragile peace, tension simmered. Not everyone in Red Hollow was willing to embrace the changes. Some whispered in dark corners about returning to the old ways, arguing that the wolves and the strange woman of the forest were unnatural threats that needed to be eliminated. Among these dissenters was a man named Silas Grady, a rancher whose livelihood had been drastically affected by the new restrictions. His anger boiled over into defiance, and he gathered a small group of like-minded individuals who shared his resentment. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Silas and his followers met in secret outside the town limits. Their faces were grim, their hearts hardened by loss and frustration. They spoke in hushed tones, plotting a course of action that could undo everything Eleanor and Jonas had worked so hard to build. "We can't just sit back and let those beasts dictate our lives," Silas growled, gripping the handle of his rifle with white-knuckled intensity. "If we don't act now, they'll overrun us completely." "But what about the spirit?" one of the men asked hesitantly. "She warned us." "She's just another monster," Silas interrupted, his voice dripping with disdain. "We don't need her approval. We're the ones who built this town, not some ghost in the woods. If she wants war, then let's give her one." The others exchanged uneasy glances, but ultimately nodded in agreement. They were desperate, their fear fueling their resolve. That night, under the cover of darkness, they set out toward the forest, intent on hunting down the wolves and confronting the mysterious woman who commanded them. Inside her cabin, Eleanor sensed a disturbance long before it reached her ears. A faint tremor ran through the ground, followed by the distant sound of hooves pounding against dirt. Her heart sank as she realized what was happening. Grabbing her lantern, she rushed outside, her gaze sweeping across the landscape until she spotted the approaching figures. "No!" she breathed, shaking her head in disbelief. "Not again." Without hesitation, she mounted her horse and galloped toward the forest, determined to intercept Silas and his men before they could do irreparable harm. Along the way, she encountered several wolves, who immediately fell into step beside her, sensing her urgency. Together, they raced deeper into the trees, their destination clear, the sacred clearing where the woman of the forest often appeared. When they arrived, the scene was already unfolding. Silas and his group had surrounded the clearing, their rifles raised and their expressions grim. In the center stood the woman, her form glowing softly in the moonlight, her red eyes blazing with fury. The wolves circled protectively around her, growling low in their throats, their hackles raised. "Enough!" Eleanor shouted, reining her horse to a halt. The wolves nearest to her parted slightly, allowing her passage into the clearing. Silas stopped this madness. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Silas sneered, lowering his weapon momentarily to glare at her. Stay out of this, Eleanor. This isn't your fight. It is my fight, she retorted, her voice rising with emotion. And it's everyone's fight if you push her too far. The woman tilted her head, studying Eleanor with an unreadable expression. Then she turned her attention back to Silas, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. You dare challenge me? After all I have done to spare your kind. I don't care who or what you are, Silas snarled, raising his rifle once more. You're nothing but a curse on this land. We'd be better off without you. Before anyone could react, chaos erupted. The wolves lunged forward, their movement swift and coordinated. Silas and his men fired wildly, bullets ricocheting off tree trunks and scattering leaves into the air. The woman raised her hands, and a powerful gust of wind swept through the clearing, knocking the attackers off balance. Amidst the commotion, Eleanor dismounted her horse and stepped closer to the woman. Please, she pleaded, her voice trembling. There has to be another way. They're scared, confused. They don't understand what they're doing. The woman regarded her silently for a moment, then lowered her arms, signaling the wolves to retreat. The wind died down, leaving behind an eerie stillness. Silas and his men stumbled to their feet, their faces pale with shock and fear. You have tested my patience, the woman said, her tone icy. Know this. I will not tolerate further disrespect. Should you cross me again, there will be no mercy. With that, she vanished, leaving only the scent of pine and earth in her wake. The wolves melted into the shadows, their glowing eyes fading into the darkness. Silas and his group slunk away, tails between their legs, vowing never to return. In the aftermath, Red Hollow faced a reckoning. News of the confrontation spread quickly, forcing the townsfolk to confront the reality of their situation. For many, it was a turning point, a realization that survival in this harsh world required more than strength and courage. It demanded humility and understanding. Eleanor continued her work, her bond with the wolves growing stronger with each passing day. She became a symbol of hope, proof that even the most unlikely alliances could flourish given time and effort. And though the woman of the forest remained elusive, her presence was felt in every rustling leaf and every echoing howl. But little did they know, the true test of their newfound harmony was yet to come. Beyond the borders of Blackwater Valley, forces greater than any wolf or spirit stirred, their intentions unknown, but their power undeniable. When the day came, Red Hollow would need every ounce of unity and strength to face whatever lay ahead. Until then, they waited, hopeful yet wary, knowing that the wilderness held secrets far older and far more dangerous than they could ever imagine.